They spelled my name wrong on the cake. The gold watch felt like plastic, and my boss called me useless into a live microphone. My name is Gerald Fox. I am 61 years old. This is how my own company tried to turn my last day into a joke, and how I answered them with paper, ink, and a steady hand. Sit back and let me tell you how my boss made me the punchline at my own retirement party, and how I shut down the room with a contract he never thought I kept. Before we get too far, don't forget to subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. The day started with a beep that wasn't a beep. I touched my badge to the reader, and it flashed red. A young guard with a bright tie cleared his throat and said, "Try again, sir." I tried again. Red. He looked past me at the lobby line. "I'll buzz you in this time." "This time," I repeated. The metal bar was cold under my palm. The lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and burnt coffee. On the third floor, someone had already put my things into a cardboard box. My mug, the stapler with my initials scratched into the side, a photograph of my wife at the river, sun on the water, and a stray hair across her mouth. The box sat on my chair like a headstone. A sticky note on the monitor said, "IT will collect at 3. I set the box on the floor. I turned on the lamp. The humble pool of light fell over the old grain of my desk, the places where I had tapped through long phone calls and late winters. "Gerald!" A voice rose from the hall before the body. Clive Mercer, my boss, came in like he owned the air. White teeth. Blue suit. Tie the color of a new bruise. He clapped my shoulder and leaned close so I could smell the sweet cologne he wore on days he expected cameras. "Big night," he said. "You ready for your send-off?" "I came to work," I said. He laughed, like I'd made a joke. "Relax. We'll keep you upright for cake time. Try not to be late to your own funeral." He left, shoes snapping on the tile, leaving a string of laughter that didn't belong to anyone. I sat. The chair squeaked in the same place it always squeaked, a tired little note. On my screen, the calendar had changed. My one-on-one with Clive was gone. A meeting called Future Vision had filled the slot. My name wasn't on the list. I checked my voicemail, one from HR, one from facilities, one from a young manager I did not know, asking me where we kept the old contracts for West Dock. He ended with, "Thanks, Jerry." My name is not Jerry. I opened the bottom drawer and set my hand on a flat, black folder. The edge had worn smooth where my fingers had learned it. I had not opened it in a long time. Not all the way. Not since the day I signed in a room that smelled like dust and new carpet, while a man in a gray suit said, "No one reads these, Gerald. You've earned it." I read it. Every line. I traced the blue ink of my own name. I watched the pen hover over the other name. I watched it land. I closed the drawer. Not yet. At 10, Nora from HR floated in with a wide smile and an envelope that matched it. Hi, happy last day, we're so proud." She put the envelope on my desk and tapped it with 2 fingers. "Just a quick thing, a little release. Standard. We sign these all the time." She tilted her head. "There's a gift for you at 6. Don't peek." "What happens if I don't sign?" I asked. Her smile held, but the edges chilled. "Oh, not a problem." It's part of the package. We want everything tidy." "Tidy," I said. She looked at the cardboard box. "You're already so organized." When she left, I slid the envelope under the black folder. The paper made a soft hiss. At 11, the printer jammed and coughed up a sheet with a headline half-printed, "Cut costs before Q3." It had been in the machine and now lay in my hand, ink still damp. At noon, a junior stopped by my door, stuttered when he saw me, and said, "Sorry, sir." I thought this office was empty. He looked at the box on the floor like it was a live thing and backed away. I took a walk to clear my head. The hallway smelled like copier toner and the faint sour left by old coffee. In the break room, the cake sat under a clear plastic dome. "Good luck, Gerald, in smart blue letters." My name is Gerald, but it looked wrong anyway. There's a way your own name can feel like it belongs to someone else when it's written by a stranger with a piping bag. While I stared at the cake, the janitor came in with his cart. Luis. He had worked here longer than anyone but me. He wiped his hands on a towel and nodded at the cake. "They never put your name on the plaque," he said. "You know that?" "They said the wall was full," I said. He shook his head once. "They took down the wall." Back at my desk, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I did not have saved. It was a photo of a whiteboard from a conference room. Someone had written, "Send him off with a laugh." Under it, a list, "Cheap watch," "Old stories," a picture of a typewriter. The caption said, "Heads up," from someone who knows. I put my hand on the lamp and felt the heat through the metal. I looked out the window. The sky over the river was the color of a spoon. A barge moved like a slow animal. A memory rose, winter 12 years ago, when the company's cash was a joke told in whispers, when the heaters rattled, when people kept their coats on at their desks, when Clive was still learning where the bathrooms were, and I was the one who called the bank, the vendor, the landlord, the clients. When I told them one by one in a voice that did not shake, "We will make this right." When I took my bonus not in cash but in something folded and sealed and filed in a black folder. When I walked home with snow stinging my cheeks and told my wife, "We're not done." At 3, IT came for the computer. A kid in a hoodie unplugged cords like he was plucking strings. He handed me a canned smile and a white cable tie from my box. "Been a minute, Mr. Fox," he said, like we had shared drinks somewhere. "Yes," I said, "a minute." At 4, the florist came. 2 tall vases of white flowers that smelled like clean sheets. She set them on the buffet table, wiped a drop of water with her sleeve, and looked at me for a second longer than a stranger should. "My mother listened to your voicemails every Monday when times were hard," she said. "She said, 'He sounds like a steady river.'" She didn't wait for me to answer. She left. The flowers shook a little in the air she left behind. Small things stacked up. The way the elevator doors took a second longer to open when I pressed the button. The way the young ones whispered legacy as if it were a joke. The way my phone didn't ring. At 5, I put my pen into my pocket. I took the black folder from the drawer. It felt heavier than it looked. I slid it into the bottom of my box, under the stapler and the mug and the photo of the river. I stood and turned off the lamp. The pool of light vanished, and I stood in the gray of early evening that made the office look like a stage waiting for the next show. The conference room had been dressed like a wedding that wasn't. White cloth, silver forks, a banner with block letters, "Thank you for your years of service." My years of service stood around the room holding paper plates. Clive stood near the head of the table. He held a microphone with 2 fingers, loose like a man holds a snack he might not finish. "Friends," he said, "tonight we say goodbye to an absolute legend." He let the words sit in the air. People clapped. He smiled. He liked the sound of his own words. He told a story about the first time he met me, how I wore a brown tie. He made it sound like the tie had been the main thing. He told another about a time my car wouldn't start and I took the bus. "Now that's old school," he said. "Gerald doesn't just go the extra mile. He takes public transit." The room laughed in the safe way rooms laugh when the boss tells them to. He opened a thin box and held up a watch that caught the light like a coin from a claw machine. "For a man who taught us what time looks like," he said, and someone snorted behind me. He motioned toward the cake. "And we got your name right," he said, and people laughed again, and he looked down at the cake as if he'd just seen it for the first time. Then he leaned one hand on the table and dropped his voice a tone lower, the way men do when they want to sound real. "Truth is," he said, "in this business, nobody's special." He smiled wide. "We are all replaceable. Even legends. Even museum pieces." The word hung there like a cold hook. Replaceable. Museum piece. He patted the table, as if to soften it. "Gerald knows I'm kidding," he said. "He's a good sport." Eyes swung to me. I felt each one like a touch. I could taste sugar in the air from the frosting. I could hear the hum of the projector, even though nothing was on the screen. I felt the edge of the cardboard box against my shin. I picked up the watch. It had weight, but not the kind that mattered. I slid it into my pocket. I stepped forward when he held out his free hand to pull me into the circle of light with him. "Speech!" Someone called. "Speech!" I took the microphone. The cord tugged against my palm and made a soft hiss. I looked at the faces. Some were bright, hungry to see me dance. Some were tight, waiting for me to swallow it. A few were soft. Those were the ones I looked at when I began. "Thank you for the kind words," I said. My voice was even. "Thank you for the cake. Thank you for the watch. Thank you for the jokes. I will not keep you long." Clive leaned back, pleased, one hand in his pocket. "I do not have a slideshow," I said. "I do not have a list of names. I have one thing." I set the microphone down on the table. The sound it made when it touched wood was small and clear. I bent, lifted my box, and set it on the table. I moved the mug. I moved the stapler. I set the photograph of the river aside with care. I lifted the black folder with 2 hands, like a man lifts a small, heavy bird. I did not open it. The room leaned forward, even the ones who didn't know they were leaning. "Before I go," I said, "I want to tell you about winter. Some of you weren't here. Some of you were in grade school. The office was cold. The lights were dim. We owed more than we could count. We told each other jokes to keep our teeth from chattering. I called a list every day. I said, 'We will make this right,' until my voice was sandpaper." In the corner, Louis stood in his gray shirt with his hands folded, looking at me like a man looks at a plumb line. I put the black folder on the white cloth. The dark against the light made it look heavier. "That winter," I said, "someone put a paper in front of me. I read it. I signed it. It was simple. It said, 'When the company stands again, a promise will stand with it. That promise has waited. It has not grown old. Paper does not get wrinkles.'" Clive shifted. "Gerald," he said into a smile, "let's not." I lifted my hand a finger's width and he stopped talking. It was almost funny, a man who never stops, stopping. "I will not open this here," I said. "I will not read aloud. I have no wish to embarrass anyone." I looked at him when I said it. "But I want you to know what respect looks like when it is written down. It looks like my name next to another name. It looks like numbers. It looks like keys. It looks like a place where you stand, and a roof that does not leak." Someone in the back swallowed so loud I heard it. The air changed a little, like a door opening down the hall. "I want you to know this," I said to the room. "No one here is a museum piece. You can make a promise and keep it. You can build a thing and stay." I closed my hand on the folder. I could feel the cover flex under my palm. "Gerald," Clive said, still smiling, "you're killing us with suspense." A few chuckled. It was thin. Maybe we can talk about that later." "We will," I said, "later." I stepped back. I put the folder into the box with the photo, and the stapler, and the mug. I picked up the box. The cardboard edges bit my fingers. I set the box down beside my chair and sat. Clive exhaled loud into his mic and tried to turn the room like a man turns a boat that has already forgotten him. "Okay, cake!" He stabbed the knife into the corner and dragged it through the blue letters. Frosting stuck to the blade like chalk. People clapped because it is what people do when they are told to. I watched the slices slide onto paper plates. The cheap fork squealed against the frosting. Sugar and butter and the sound of plastic. I ate none. After cake came stories from others. A man I hired when he was 22 told one about how I kept a spare tie in my desk in case someone spilled soup. He laughed at his own punchline. A woman from accounting remembered when I carried a space heater from desk to desk and set it by cold feet. Her voice shook a little. "He never said we would be okay," she said. "He just made it feel like we would." Clive cut the mic. "Last round," he said. "Back to work tomorrow, folks. Except for Gerald. He gets to finally put his feet up." Laughter rolled and died at the edges like weak surf. When the room thinned, I stood. The lights hummed their invisible hum. I could feel the grit of cake sugar under my shoe where someone had dropped a piece. Clive came close, lips still smiling but eyes not. "Buddy," he said. He used that word like a bandage. "You had us worried for a second. What is that thing?" He nodded at the box. "Something I read," I said. "You're not going to, come on, let's not make a scene." "I did not make a scene," I said. "I made a promise." He flashed his teeth. Up close they looked too small. All right. Big mystery man. Hey! His voice dipped, friendly now, like syrup over something old. If you want to swap that watch for something nicer, send me a note. I'll have Nora take care of it. We'll get you a real one. I have a watch, I said. It's on the river. It tells time by the light. He laughed in a way that said he did not understand and did not care to. I left a conference room with my box against my hip. The hall was empty. The carpet gave a little under my weight. In my office, the lamp was off. The window was gray. I slid the black folder out and set it on the desk. I ran one finger along the edge. It left no mark. I opened it a little, the way you open a door to see if someone is sleeping. Inside there were copies, one with blue ink that had not faded, one with black with a seal that still pressed a shallow ring into the paper. There was a small key taped inside an envelope. There was a photo of a building in winter, windows dark, snow along the sills like hard sugar. I closed it again. The click was quiet, but it filled the room for me. My phone buzzed. A message from a number saved under Alvarez, the building manager. We had shared coffee in the lobby while the heat sputtered 12 winters ago. He had a way of speaking that made you feel like the ground would not move under you. Tomorrow at 9, he wrote. I'll bring the book, you bring the book, we'll match pages. I typed 9. He sent a thumbs up that looked too young for his hands. I took the watch from my pocket and set it on the desk. It looked smaller on the wood. I pressed the button on the side. It lit blue and told me a time I did not want. I pressed it again, and the face went blank. I placed the watch into the drawer where the paper clips lived. I turned off the lamp. For a second, the room was all window and gray. I lifted the box and walked out into the hall. On the way to the elevator, I passed 2 men in clean shoes. They were not from here. One glanced at my box and then at my face and then down at his phone. The other said, "Big change around here. Coat to the wall." The elevator doors opened slow and closed faster. I watched the numbers drop. In the lobby, the guard with the bright tie nodded at me. His eyes were kinder now. He leaned a little and said, "My dad retired last year. They forgot his cake. He cried in the car and then laughed about it later. I still don't know which part was the truth." "Both," I said. Outside, the air had that cool that means the day will be colder after the sun leaves. The river moved. People moved. I put the box in the trunk of my car and closed it with my hip. At home, I set the box on the kitchen table. I took out the mug. I washed it. The water made a sound like rain on a tin roof. I dried it. I put it on the counter where my wife used to stand with her hands wrapped around a cup and her eyes on the radio. I took out the photo of the river and set it on the ledge. For a moment, the light hit the glass and the water looked like it moved. Then I took the black folder. I did not open it. I slid it into the back of the bread drawer where no one looks for anything. I slept with the window cracked so the night could find me. A truck downshifted somewhere far away. A dog barked twice and quit. The house settled like a big animal finding its shape. Morning came clear. I carried the folder under my arm like a thin, quiet friend. At the building, Alvarez had the big book open on a metal table in the basement. It smelled like dust and paint and something wet in the walls. "Morning," he said. He had coffee in a paper cup and a pencil behind his ear. We did not speak much. He turned pages. I turned pages. We placed 2 copies side by side, names lined up, dates lined up. There was a circle around a line in his book that also sat in mine. His finger tapped it once. He looked at me. He smiled, the smallest smile I've ever seen on a human. "Simple," he said. "Simple," I said. We did not do anything that looked exciting. We did not raise our voices. We wrote 2 emails. We placed 2 calls. We asked for 2 letters that I knew would arrive at the time they would arrive because time is stubborn, but fair when numbers match and ink is dry. On the street, the sun had already found the upper floors. A pigeon walked like it was late. I watched people go in and out of the revolving door and thought about all the mornings when my head had been full of other people's fires. Today, I had a bucket and a list and no fire at my back. At noon, Nora from HR sent me a cheery note with a smiley face. "Just checking in on the release." The exclamation point looked like a tiny man standing up very straight to look taller. I wrote back, "We will not be using that document. Thank you." She wrote, "Oh? Can we chat?" Clive called an hour later. "Buddy," he said. "No hello. You're not going to make this weird, are you?" "Am I weird?" I asked. "Don't be like that. We had to have a little fun last night. People were nervous. You know how it is." "I do," I said. "I know how it is to be cold in winter with the power bill in your hand. I know how it is to find heat. I know how it is to hold a promise and not drop it." "Gerald," he said. The smile had left his voice. "What do you want?" "I want the thing you promised," I said. "The thing in the book. The thing I signed in blue. The thing I read." Silence. The kind where a man covers the lower part of the phone and stares at the wall and sees last night's jokes in the wrong light. "We'll talk," he said. "Let's meet next week." "Friday," I said. I hung up. I made a sandwich. I ate it by the window. Friday took its time. Each day, a small piece clicked into place. A letter came. A reply came. A simple call ended with a simple word. Confirmed. I wrote a note on a pad and tore it off and put it in my pocket. Bring both copies. Friday night, the retirement party photos went up on the company's page. In one, Clive's mouth was wide. He was laughing at his own line. In another, I stood with the watch box in my hand. My face looked like a flat lake. People wrote comments with little hearts and cake emojis and the word legend more times than the word deserves. I printed one photo. I put it on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a tomato. I did not know why. Maybe to remind me of the room I would see again, full of faces waiting for me to be small. Friday came. I wore a clean shirt. I put the folder in a simple brown envelope. I held it by my side as I walked into the lobby. My badge flashed red. The guard buzzed me in before I asked. On the third floor, they had cleaned the conference room until it shone. Bottles of water in a neat line. Coasters set at each seat. Clive sat at the head with two others. Janet from finance. A woman with clear eyes and a pencil that looked like it could bite. And a lawyer I did not know with a tie as tight as a fist. They stood when I came in, then sat too fast. "Gerald," Clive said, reaching his hand across the water. I did not take it. He pulled it back like a man withdraws a bet. "We're here to clarify," Janet said. Her voice was soft but not weak. "We've reviewed some things. There may be ambiguity." She glanced at the lawyer. "Ambiguity," I said. Clive smiled. "Language," he said, like it was a joke. "Let's just find a solution that works for everyone." I set the envelope on the table. It made a flat sound. I did not push it across. I did not open it. I let it sit. "I am not here to fight," I said. "I am here to match pages." I saw Janet's fingers twitch, that tiny motion you see when someone hears the right bell. She opened her folder and slid out a copy of a page that I knew by heart. She set her finger on the line. She did not look at Clive. She looked at me. "I see the match," she said. The lawyer cleared his throat. "We could consider alternative." "No," Janet said. Her pencil tapped once and stopped. Clive smiled a tight smile. He lifted his hands. "Okay, fine, we'll honor it." The words came out like the last bite of a too-dry pastry. "We'll clean this up, quietly." "Quietly," I said. He spread his hands. "No need to make a scene." "I have not made one," I said. He laughed into the room, then stopped when it came back empty. "We signed nothing that day. There were steps," he said. "There were checks," she said. "There were keys," I said. "We stood. We did the nothing handshake that men do when none of it means anything." I left. On the way to the elevator, I passed the break room. The cake box sat open, crumbs dry and blue icing hardened into a thin scab at the edge. The knife lay on a plate, frosting dried in a long curl. I turned off the light and closed the door. I did not go home. I drove to the river. I parked and walked to the rail and leaned my elbows on the cold metal. The water moved. A gull hung in the air and then decided not to and dropped. I took out the envelope and opened it halfway. The paper inside caught the light and gave it back. I slid it shut. I put it back under my arm. On Monday, an email went to a small list. It had no emojis. It had no hearts. It had one line and a number. It was not dramatic. It was a door opening. On Wednesday, the company announced a special meeting for the next Friday. End of day. To honor our values, Clive wrote in the invite. To celebrate our future. The words sat on the screen like cut flowers in a hotel lobby. I stood in my kitchen and looked at the black folder on the counter. My hand made a slow fist and opened. I took the envelope. I slid the folder inside. I pressed the flap. The glue held. Friday came. The room was fuller than the retirement night. There was no cake. There were cameras. Someone had put small bottles of water at every other chair. Clive stood at the head in a navy suit and a smile that looked like it had been practiced in the mirror until it hurt. "Friends," he said, "we gather today to mark a turning." I stood at the side, not at a seat. The envelope hung at my side. "Some of you have heard rumors," he said with a chuckle that asked people to laugh and told them when. Some did. Rumors are fun. Paper is funnier. He held up a page. It was not one of mine. It was a sheet of his own, with bullets that meant nothing. "Before the bullets," I said, and my voice carried like the last time, "one thing." He froze. The room turned. A camera lens flashed a blink of light. I stepped into the light and set the envelope on the table, right beside his empty hand. He looked at it the way a man looks at a small quiet animal he does not trust. He did not touch it. I looked at the people who had given me their winters and their breaths. I thought of the guard's father with a missing cake. I thought of my wife at the river. I thought of the janitor's hands and the florist's voice and Alvarez's pencil tapping once against a line we both knew by heart. "This," I said, tapping the envelope with one finger so the sound carried, "is a promise. You'll hear it soon. Not tonight." A ripple moved through the room, small as a breeze before a front. "Tonight," I said, "I only ask for quiet." I raised my hand. The band from last week wasn't here, but the hum of the lights dropped in my ear, like the building itself took a breath and held it. Even Clive's smile stood still, not sure which way to go. I put my palm flat on the envelope and left it there. Then I took it away. And every person in that room leaned an inch closer to a future they did not yet see. Clive's laugh returned, weak and hollow. "Gerald's always been dramatic," he said, trying to guide the room back. "He likes a good story." He tapped the fake bullet points on his page. "But the truth is, folks, business is about moving forward, not—" I didn't move. I didn't blink. I only rested my hand back on the envelope. That tiny gesture was louder than his microphone. The room leaned toward me instead of him. He cleared his throat. "We'll circle back. Let's keep it light, huh?" But no one laughed this time. Even the loyal ones, the ones who usually laughed at anything, stayed quiet. Janet's pencil tapped once against her notes. She was looking at me, not at him. I lifted the envelope and tucked it under my arm. "I don't need to open this yet," I said. "You all have already heard enough. Paper doesn't rot. Paper waits. And when the time comes, the right people will read every line." I started walking toward the door. The silence that followed me was thick and strange. Not the silence of boredom or dismissal. The silence of a clock that had just stopped ticking and left everyone staring at the hands. At the door, I turned. "You called me replaceable," I said. My eyes locked on Clive. "You called me useless. Let's see how useless looks when it holds the key to your next quarter." His face tightened. The smile cracked. His lips pressed together, color draining from his cheeks. I stepped out and let the door shut behind me with a solid click. The hallway smelled of lemon polish. The carpet gave a soft crunch under my shoes. A woman at reception looked up at me with wide eyes, then back down at her keyboard without a word. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone was buzzing. Calls, messages, unknown numbers. I let it buzz. I pushed through the glass doors into the cool night air. The sky was bruised with clouds, the kind that hold rain but don't drop it yet. Outside, Luis the janitor leaned on his cart. He raised his chin. "I heard," he said. "You didn't," I replied. "Not yet, but you will." He smiled. Slow, steady, good. I walked to my car. The black folder inside the envelope felt heavier with each step, not as a burden, but as a weight that steadied me. I placed it on the passenger seat and drove home, headlights cutting through the gathering dark. At home, the house felt different, not empty, ready. I put the envelope on the kitchen table and sat across from it. I poured myself a glass of water and drank slowly, each sip anchoring me further. The phone kept buzzing. It didn't matter. Timing was mine now. The next morning, news spread fast. Someone in the meeting had whispered out what happened. How the old man had walked in with papers that could tear the floor out from under the company. Investors started calling. Employees whispered in the break room. HR sent emails that smelled of panic, asking everyone not to, quote, speculate or spread misinformation. By noon, Clive himself called me. His voice was tight, wrapped in false warmth. "Gerald, buddy, let's meet. Just us. Lunch. We can smooth this out." "No," I said. He chuckled nervously. "Come on, don't be stubborn. You don't want to look petty." "I don't look like anything," I said. "You do." Silence. Then he snapped. "You think you're the hero? You're nothing without this place." "I was never nothing," I said, and hung up. That weekend, my daughter came over. She had 2 coffees in a cardboard tray and a look in her eyes that told me she had heard everything already. "Dad," she said, sitting across from me, "is it true? Do you really have something on them?" I nodded once. "Not something. The thing." Her eyes widened. "What are you going to do?" I glanced at the envelope. "Wait. Let him sweat. Let the walls close in. And when he thinks the laughter has saved him, I'll show him how quiet a room can get." She sat back, shaking her head in awe. "You're not even angry." "I'm steady," I said. "That's worse for him." And I meant it. By Monday morning, the company was leaking from every seam. I didn't need to be inside the building to hear it. Calls came in from old colleagues, some I hadn't spoken to in years. "Gerald, what did you show them?" one whispered. His voice shook like he was afraid the phone itself was recording him. "Nothing yet," I said. "That's enough," he muttered, and hung up. The rumor had outgrown the truth. That's what happens when people smell fear. They imagine the worst before they've even seen it, and Clive knew that. At noon, I got an email. Subject line, friendly invitation. Inside, only one line, dinner. Tonight. My treat, please. Signed with his initials, as if he were some monarch. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the folder. I read the lines again, the same ones I had read a dozen winters ago. The ink hadn't faded. My name was still there, and so was his. His in sloppy pen, mine in slow, careful strokes. Next to it, the clause that had saved the company then and would cost him everything now. 5% ownership, non-expiring, tied to survival of the corporation. He'd forgotten. I hadn't. That evening, my daughter came by again. She carried a bag of groceries and insisted on making dinner. As she chopped onions at the counter, she asked, "Are you going to use it?" "Not yet," I said. "Why not?" "Because he hasn't finished burying himself. Let him dig a little deeper, then the papers will speak louder." She nodded, though her hands moved faster, like her nerves needed somewhere to go. By Wednesday, the stock price had slipped, small, almost nothing. But whispers moved faster than numbers. At the coffee shop near the office, I overheard 2 young analysts mutter, "If Fox shows those papers, Mercer's done." They didn't notice me. I stirred my cup and smiled. Thursday evening, a black car rolled slow past my house. Windows tinted, engine humming low. It circled once, then again. I watched from behind the curtain. Not fear, just patience. If Clive thought intimidation would work, he'd forgotten who held the real power. On Friday morning, the call came from Janet. Her voice was calm, steady, but there was something beneath it. "Gerald, can you come in? We're meeting at 3. It's about clarity." I could hear Clive in the background, loud, blustering. Janet lowered her voice. "Bring the folder." "I was going to," I said. When I arrived, the lobby was busier than ever, cameras outside, news crews waiting for scraps. Employees slipped past them with heads down. Inside, the guard buzzed me in before my badge even touched the glass. Upstairs, the conference room was already full. Executives, lawyers, accountants. At the head sat Clive, his smile stretched thin as paper. The watch he wore gleamed under the lights, but his hand trembled when he lifted his water glass. I set the folder on the table and slid into the seat across from him. The sound of that folder hitting the wood was louder than any gavel. The room stilled. Clive cleared his throat. "Gerald, let's be reasonable. You don't want to drag the past into this." I looked at him, then at Janet, then at the others. The past built the present, and promises don't expire just because you're uncomfortable. I opened the folder, slowly. The papers fanned out, black ink on white, the contract that tied my name to theirs like iron. Gasps rippled down the table. Someone cursed under their breath. Janet's pencil tapped once, sharp and final. "This company survived winter because of me," I said. "And now, you call me useless, replaceable. Tonight you will see which of us is replaceable." Clive's smile collapsed. He reached for the mic at his seat, but stopped when no one else moved to back him. The silence was total. Clive's hands twitched on the table. He tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. 5%? Gerald, come on! That was decades ago. Ancient history. We've restructured a dozen times since then. I slid the first page closer to the center. My finger tapped the clause. Non-expiring. Survives restructuring. Carved in. Plain as daylight. Murmurs spread. Janet leaned in, her sharp eyes cutting the page like a scalpel. She nodded once. "It's real." Clive's face flushed. "We can negotiate, we can." "No," I said. My voice was calm, almost soft. "This isn't about negotiating. This is about respect. You called me useless, replaceable, museum piece. You wanted a laugh at my expense. But here's the truth. I own part of this company. I always have. And that doesn't go away because you forgot." A young lawyer at the far end shifted in his chair, whispering to the man beside him. Janet silenced him with a look. "You embarrassed yourself, Clive," I said. And now everyone sees it. For the first time in all the years I'd known him, his smile vanished completely, his lips pressed together, white at the edges. I gathered the papers, slid them back into the folder and stood. "You have two choices," I said. "Honor what was promised, or face the consequences when this leaves this room. And it will leave this room if you push me." Silence. Heavy. The kind that fills every corner. Finally, Janet spoke. "We'll honor it." The pencil tapped once more, firm. That was the sound of a verdict. I turned and walked out. Not rushed. Not slow. Just steady. The folder under my arm felt lighter now, not because the papers had changed, but because I no longer carried them alone. Everyone had seen. Everyone knew. In the lobby, people looked at me with new eyes. A young man nodded as if to say thank you. Another whispered, "Legend." The word didn't feel cheap this time. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters called my name. I kept walking, the evening air cool on my face. Behind me, in that glass tower, Clive was still sitting at the head of a table where no one was laughing anymore. At home, my daughter was waiting. She stood on the porch with 2 mugs of coffee, steam curling into the night. "Well?" she asked. I smiled. The room went silent. She laughed then, real laughter, the kind I hadn't heard in months. She pressed 1 mug into my hand and squeezed my arm. For the first time in a long time, the weight in my chest lifted. And in that silence, in that steady hum of life returning, I knew respect had been written down, and tonight it had been read aloud without a word. The next week was a storm without thunder. It didn't roar, it whispered. That's how you knew it was real. By Monday morning, emails had begun leaking. Not from me. Not from Janet. From inside. Short notes passed through the staff like smuggled letters. Clive ignored warnings. The old contract is binding. Board is panicking. I sat in my kitchen, Black folder closed on the table, and watched the river outside my window. My phone lit up with messages every hour. Some were supportive. Some were curious. Some were frightened. I didn't answer any of them. By Wednesday, Clive tried a different tactic. He called my daughter, left her 3 voicemails in a row, his voice thin and sugary. "Tell your father he doesn't need to do this. Tell him it's not worth it. Tell him I'll make things right." She came to me that evening, phone still buzzing in her hand. "He's desperate," she said. I stirred my tea and nodded. "Good." She frowned. "You're enjoying this?" "No," I said, "but desperation is the soil where truth finally grows." On Thursday, I walked past the building. Just walked, nothing more. Cameras still hovered outside, catching every face that went in. Employees huddled near the doors, whispering. One of them spotted me, nudged the others. Heads turned. A ripple went through the group. Some nodded at me, almost a bow. A few even clapped softly, quickly, as if afraid of being seen. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I just kept walking, the folder under my arm like it was part of me. That night, a car pulled into my driveway, Clive himself, without an entourage. His suit was wrinkled, his tie askew. He knocked once, hard. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "Gerald," he said, his voice hoarse, "we can fix this." "You don't have to." "I don't have to do anything," I interrupted, "and that's exactly why I'll do what's right." His jaw clenched. "Do you realize what you're doing to me, to the company?" "I realize what you tried to do to me," I said, "at my own farewell, in front of everyone. You thought humiliation would erase history. But history doesn't vanish because you laugh over it." He shook his head violently. "You'll burn everything down." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so he had to lean in. "I'm not burning anything. I'm showing the match you struck 12 years ago. The flame belongs to you." For a moment, the man who strutted through lobbies, who barked orders into microphones, looked small. His shoulders sagged. His breath quickened. His eyes darted as if searching for an escape. Then he turned, stomped down the steps, and drove away with tires screaming against the pavement. Friday morning came with a formal summons. A board meeting. Not the friendly kind. The kind with minutes recorded, lawyers in the corner, every seat filled. When I entered the room, the tension was thick enough to touch. Janet sat poised, papers stacked in neat towers. Clive was already there, but his smile had deserted him entirely. His eyes darted around the table, never resting on mine. "Mr. Fox," the chairwoman said formally, "please be seated." I sat. The folder landed on the wood with that same flat sound, the sound that had followed me for weeks. "This meeting is to address outstanding claims tied to historical agreements," she said. "Specifically, your claim of retained equity." "It's not a claim," I said calmly. I slid the papers forward, each page spreading like cards in a dealer's hand. "It's a promise, written, signed, witnessed. Non-expiring." Whispers broke out instantly. One lawyer raised a hand. "We need to examine the validity." Janet cut him off. "We already have." "The language is airtight." The chairwoman nodded, slow and deliberate. "Then this is binding." Every eye turned to Clive. His face flushed crimson. "This is absurd. He's an old man waving dusty papers." "Dust doesn't make ink fade," Janet said sharply. I leaned forward just slightly. "You called me useless, Clive. Replaceable. Tonight, the board sees which of us carries weight." The silence that followed wasn't just silence. It was a verdict hanging in the air. Clive opened his mouth to argue, but no sound came. He looked around the table, but no one met his eyes. Even the lawyers shifted in their chairs, avoiding him. The chairwoman's gavel hit the table once. "The record will show that Gerald Fox's equity is recognized and enforceable, effective immediately." A ripple of nods. Pens scratched signatures. The sound of paper sealing fate. I gathered my folder slowly, deliberately, and stood. My chair scraped back, a low groan in the charged room. "Gentlemen," I said, "ladies, respect isn't a gift, it's a contract, and it was signed long before your jokes." I walked to the door. No one stopped me. No one spoke. Behind me, Clive sat frozen, his hands limp on the table, his world collapsing without a sound. Outside, the city air hit my face like cool water. My daughter was waiting in the lobby, her eyes wide with questions. "Well?" she asked. I smiled faintly. The room went quiet. We stepped out together into the evening. The building stood behind us, tall and glassy, but for the first time in years it didn't feel like it towered over me. It felt small. The weekend came, gray and heavy with clouds. I woke before dawn, the black folder no longer on the table but in a locked drawer where it belonged. It had served its purpose. At noon, my phone buzzed with messages I didn't bother to open. Reporters, old co-workers, even strangers. I ignored them all and drove to the river. The water was restless, waves chopping at the banks. I leaned on the railing, breathing slow, the chill cutting through my coat. Behind me, footsteps scuffed the pavement. I didn't turn. I already knew. Clive's voice cracked the air. "You ruined me, Gerald." I looked over my shoulder. His suit was wrinkled, hair wild, tie gone. The man who had called me replaceable now looked like the world had replaced him overnight. "You ruined yourself," I said. "No." His voice rose, desperate, shaking. "You had to wave those papers around. You had to show them up. I built that place." I turned fully then, facing him square on. "You built nothing. You mocked the men who held the beams, the women who balanced the books, the ones who carried it through winter. You mocked me, and all I did was remind them whose name was written down when no one else showed up." He staggered a step closer, eyes red, spit at the corner of his mouth. "So what now, huh? You want to take my chair, my office?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't want your chair, I don't want your office. I already took something better." He frowned, confused, as if bracing for another paper, another clause. I leaned close enough that he had to feel the weight of each word. I took the room. "The silence, the respect, you'll never get it back." His face crumpled. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. And then he turned and stumbled away, swallowed by the gray. I stayed by the river. The water moved steady, unstoppable. That evening my daughter came by. She saw the quiet in my eyes and asked no questions. She set 2 mugs of coffee on the table, steam curling in the air. We sat in silence, drinking slow. The house hummed with its old familiar sounds, the creak of the floorboards, the tick of the clock, the sigh of wind through the eaves. For the first time in years, the silence felt whole. And in that stillness I knew the truth. Respect wasn't given back to me. It had never left. It had only been waiting for me to open the right page. The laughter was gone. The room was mine. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe and join Taste of Revenge family, and share your impressions of the story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on one of the boxes on the right. Thank you for watching to the end.